Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Conversations of Agile Change. Today, I'm really excited about this conversation. I have with us the fabulous Allie Hartman of the Change Curiosity Lab. Now, Allie is going to be joining us in January 2026 to do a webinar for us on the topic of the moment, AI and Agile Change. And I thought it'd be really cool to have a bit of a chat in advance, get to know her, find out a little bit more about her thinking, and particularly, what's grabbed our attention and why we're really keen to bring it to you in a webinar. Ali, welcome to Conversations of Agile Change.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, pleasure, pleasure. Um, Obviously, we're going to speak about AI, but before we do, let's speak about the human and tell us, how did you get into change management, change leadership, change practitioner? What was it that brought you to this moment where you're sitting here and chatting to us?
Awesome. So, when I was growing up, I always thought I was going to be an engineer. I had that analytical mind. I like to take things apart. I like to figure things out. And I was set on that. And then midway through college, my university, I decided, nope, that wasn't it. That's not it. So, I pivoted to psychology. And so I always think I have that kind of technical analytical mind and also the human people side, which I think is great and where I've spent most of my career in kind of technology change management. And so I just kept kind of, after graduation, I kept learning, I kept getting degrees. I've got a bunch of degrees and certifications. And at the time, it felt a little disjointed, and people were probably questioning, like, what are you doing? But once I figured out that I wanted to go into consulting at a big technology firm, through some networking, landed on a change management team working with one of our state clients. And I said, this is it. All the
Mm.
pieces connected. I've got, the technology side, I've got the psychology, the behavior change side. And I knew that was it. I could, check everything else off the box, and say, that wasn't it, but here we are. And that was, gosh, 11, 12, 13 something years ago. And I've just continued to grow and do different roles within the change space. And I really just love being able to connect and be the translator really from kind of that technology side into the people side, because of course, without any humans being brought along the journey, something's just not going to be adopted. So that is how I've kind of gone through a little bit of my journey.
Yeah, fantastic. I think one of the things that has stood out to us is your generosity. Obviously, you are an avid lifelong learner. You can really pick that up. So we see you as quite curious and generous in your role as a change leader. And so I'm thinking of a lot of the work that you share on LinkedIn is really quite helpful to people. You're heavily involved with ACMP as well. You know, I'm curious about where does this passion for community and learning come from? How did that, from someone who thought they were going into engineering to actually this person who is constantly giving out? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Sure. And I think that's a little bit how my brain just works. I love innovating. I love being curious. I think that goes along really well with, being a lifelong learner and always kind of asking those questions. Well, why not this? What if we did it this way? How else could we do something? And luckily, honestly, I've had wonderful, supportive leaders and sponsors that have been on teams with me who have helped me in my confidence to be able to say, no, actually, you are kind of an expert in this field. I remember only, 2 or 3 years ago, I was looking, I was in my first kind of data strategy role, and I was looking for the intersection of data and change management. And I kept being like, there's no one on LinkedIn talking about this. Like, this can't be the only one. And my boss would say, yes, you are the only one looking at this. Like, no one else has time to write on LinkedIn about this. Maybe if they're dabbling, but really, you are the expert in this thing. And I'm like, no, that cannot be. I'm not the expert in this. And his confidence in me, kind of broke down some of those imposter syndrome ideas in my own head of being like, no, I can't be the expert. Like, yeah, I have some experience and it's great. And having a few of those leaders, those mentors, those sponsors really speaking up for me, at the tables that I'm not sitting at, has really given me the confidence to say, no, actually, I do know what I'm talking about. I have a lot of degrees and certifications and experience leading teams, leading transformation, and leading change. And so I just love to be able to share that with people. And now that I have, more of the confidence of saying, yes, I know those things, but I would also like you to have those things. And so I love being able to share that with people, make things, especially in the world of AI, and that fear factor, and just having that tangible, quick, easy prompt or that example or that use case for people to grab and say, okay, that's maybe not as scary. I can copy paste at least to get started. And so I try to make everything super tangible and actionable and valuable for different, change practitioners and non-change practitioners and leaders so that they can really help, curate their own story and what that looks like. And if I can help contribute to some of that learning in others, I'm super happy about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love to share.
And I think that's what really grabbed our eye. And like we've shared a couple of your pieces through our Sprint newsletter because it is the accessibility of it more so than the theory or the knowledge. It's actually really practical, which, we're huge fans of. Um, Can we just backtrack a little bit? You talked about your certifications and all of your formal skills and training. So you are an Agile Change Leadership Institute alumni. You did our Agile Change
I
Manager
am.
certificate. Um, how do you see the relationship between formal skills development and informal skills development? So things that you pick up on the job and because I am mindful of, we talk about the industrial certification complex, right? That everybody feels that they need
Mhm.
a certification to be able to progress. And as much as we've got skin in the game in this space, we would also argue that no, you can progress without doing formal training. And I'm curious what you think is the balance or how that plays out together.
Yeah, and I get this question a lot too because again, I have a lot of degrees. I've been to school quite a bit, and certifications that I've done on my own. And I think there's incredible value, especially starting out, to have some of those foundational pieces to learn, especially for change management, what is change management? What activities go in that role? What are the different types of roles you can have? I think that foundational piece is super important to have, especially when you're kind of starting out. And then I think with that, though, probably not shocking to anyone is that really that on the job learning, and shadowing or testing things out with practitioners that have been in the field for a while, is so important because even if you read the best textbooks and methodologies in change management, there's always just so much you have to learn on the fly. And sometimes you get, thrown into the deep end or, drinking from a fire hose, all of those different analogies to understand. But I think I always kind of tell people, what's your end goal a little bit of, do you need that thing on your resume? Are you going to be looking for jobs soon? Are you, do you want really that stamp of approval from an authority in change management to say, yes, I know these things. Yes, I am continuously learning. I am practicing my skills versus a kind of one and done, here's the course I took, check the box. And to have that experience to back it up too. Or are you just trying to be a lifelong learner and you don't really need the credential per se, but you want, you have a thirst for learning and you want to, try all these methodologies and get, deep learning in maybe one methodology or get more of the breadth. And so I always kind of say, what's the value? And of course, there's a cost for either side. It could be good looking on your resume and that could boost you in a job market. But maybe it's, cost prohibitive at the moment. And there's so many resources like LinkedIn or Substack, where you can get a lot of those kind of free things. YouTube, where you can get some of that learning, even just mentoring and, shadowing from colleagues or meeting with them regularly to say, hey, I'm working through this scenario, help me work through it. Is so valuable that I would never discount it or say you have to get all of these certifications. I think in the world we're in today, where education, at least in the US, is changing quite rapidly, and there's very cost prohibitive nature to it. So I think if you can find those opportunities, if you have the chance and the opportunity to take a course and learn, that's wonderful, and that will always help you. That's never
Mm.
gonna, go against you at all. But I think pairing it with the experience and the mentorship is so valuable to get really that on the job learning. And you can do that in a lot of informal ways.
Yeah, no, very, I think that probably sits with us because I think one of the things that we're always really conscious of is people find us through various means and methods, and we always want to be able, the reason why we do post these webinars on YouTube is we want to have a channel of where there is free, accessible education. We want people, we don't want cost to be a barrier if you really need it. Um,
Hmm.
Absolutely, our courses will take you to the next level and, can't
Hmm.
replicate what we've got on YouTube. But there shouldn't be a barrier to, if you are motivated enough. And I think that's probably the
Mm.
piece here that bridges what we're both saying here is that there needs to be some level of intrinsic motivation. If you are not
Hmm.
motivated to learn and apply, doesn't matter how many courses you do or certifications you do, it won't be of value to you. So, yeah,
Yeah, and I
interesting.
think I
Mm,
I think also, you know, having being a part of a newer profession with the official title of change management, it's only been around, officially for a few decades probably. Um, we want more people to understand what change management is. We want to grow change leaders, not just with the title of change management, but with, understanding transformation and how,
mm,
culture at your organization shapes, everything that you do. And so
yeah,
I always see it too as a, hey, I want everyone to have this knowledge so that they're better prepared to even have coaching conversations with their teammates or have a
that's it.
conversation with a leader. And so I always think that it's great to, share the wealth. Of course, like you said, having
Yeah,
the deeper level certifications is wonderful to get really, the true understanding. But at least for that kind of high level, hey, here's what we offer. Here are all these things that you can just, sign up for our newsletter, read our
yeah.
LinkedIn, read our blogs, watch our YouTube. All of those sort of things are contributing to a better, uh, knowledge of the
Oh,
general public around us.
the one thing I do know is we will never be enough, right, Ali? In our
Mm.
roles in what we're doing, we are never enough in this space of change. And so, to your point, the more that can just move the dial on change capability, the better all organizations are. So, yes, violent agreement with you there, Ali. Um, Now, the topic of the moment, you can't open anything without seeing the headlines about AI. Um, I've been really interested. I've been to a few meetups of late and conferences, and I'm getting the sense that, and I've been a bit surprised, many change practitioners feel quite threatened by AI. And I'm curious if you can unpack that. Has that ever been your experience? If not, why not? What do you think's going on there?
Yeah, and I think it comes down to a lot of different changes, which, us as humans maybe have that general sense of, oh my gosh, this thing is new and I don't understand it. So I put this wall up. And I think our organizations or and the media is sometimes not helping to remove that wall in some of the kind of hype that's out there. And I say that I when maybe ChatGPT first launched,
Hmm.
um, it was probably a few months of me reading things saying like, kind of, what is this? What does this mean? Um, how would I apply it? Um, and just kind of, like everything else, just have so many things going on all the time. It's like, I can't try this new technology. Like, let's put that on the back burner. And then it really started probably with just trying to throw a super basic, help me write this email or something to that effect. And starting to see like, whoa, that's pretty cool for just, a 2-minute thing, super simple. And so I'd say a great way to kind of help work through that fear of the unknown, which it is a lot of unknown because the technology behind what you're chatting with is kind of a black box. It even, the greatest technicians sometimes don't quite understand exactly what it's pulling from. And so of course there's a piece that you're like, I don't know what's happening back there. I don't know where my data is going. I don't know where this is, hitting in the back end. And so I think even just starting super simply with something that you already know the answer to, I think is a great way to just start. I'm a huge fan of experimentation. And it doesn't have to be, with personal data, it doesn't have to be at work. It can be the most simple thing. I think one of the first prompts I tried out was probably in the spring after ChatGPT launched was help me create a bedtime story for my, I don't know what she was at the time, 5-year-old's daughter, about a bear in a tutu at a circus or something like kind of crazy or whatever.
Yeah.
And it came up with this perfect story that I was like, I could never come up with something like, I'm not creative enough for that kind of improv. And I was like, whoa, this is cool. Now that I didn't put any personal information, it was totally random. And that's when I started to see, wait a minute, what if I applied this to anything that really matters? And again, luckily I had amazing team leads and leaders and sponsors that really wanted to promote this new technology. I worked at a very, forward-thinking technology firm, consulting firm, and I was on a team that was really our task was to innovate and learn the new things. And so I had a great chance to really have that space to say, I'm just supposed to play with this thing and figure it out for everyone else. And then once I figure it out, I can share
Cool.
it with others. And
That would
so
be
I
so
always
cool.
had this this amazing, role where I had the space and the task to, within a change management lens to figure out, hey, how do we do this for communications? How do we do this for training? How do we do this for adoption? How do we do this for metrics? Each little piece along the way. And it took a lot of working out loud,
Yeah.
in, myself with the AI, myself with a team member, with a group of team members, just playing around with it and experimenting and being really okay to fail if it did not come out right. And especially in those earlier days where sometimes you get things and you're like, what? That doesn't make any sense. Or I would never say it like that. And so really just doing that, let's sit on a call, let's pull up, Copilot or, Gemini or ChatGPT or whatever tool you can use, and saying, hey, what's a problem that we're working on today? Okay, I need to try to win over this, challenging stakeholder. Okay, great. Let's put that in and see what happens. Okay, we got a pretty good generic answer. Okay, great. Let's do it one step further. Let's add a little bit of context. Let's add some more about this person and what they value. Okay, now let's go a little bit deeper, a little bit deeper. Oh, that didn't work. Go back. Okay, this one's good. And so really helping, remove that barrier and wall and being very, humble and transparent. I
Mm.
don't know everything. Everything is changing all the time. Even if I'm an AI expert, what does that mean? 2 years of really diving into this kind of generative AI. And so being okay with being, failing fast and learning, and saying, hey, that didn't quite work. Let's try it another way and let's experiment. And having that safe space, that psychological safety on a team to say, I'm the leader of this team and I don't know what's going on, but let's try it together and see what happens. And then it's once you kind of get some of those initial, kind of basic, change skills, comms,
Mm.
training, adoption, metrics, all of those pieces, then you start to see, okay, what if I really dive in here? What if I can really partner with AI? And then that way you can kind of work through some of those fears in a safe space, even if it's not to take over completely all the tasks of your job, which I would never say. Anyway, I always want human in the loop. So, but I think having that space to experiment, and even if it's, that was my task as a team lead, but if you are not in that role and you are busy, you know, give 5 minutes at the beginning of your day to play around with a prompt, or start every team meeting with 5 minutes where you do it together with your teammates and you try to solve some scenario together. Even if you have those little chunks of time that you can do one simple, task or prompt, even do some reading on, anywhere, LinkedIn, Substack, anywhere, to do a little reading and research to help you kind of disarm yourself on, ooh, it's this big scary thing that's going to come and take my job. Because once you really can partner with it, it will really level up your game, and both for, speed, efficiency, productivity, but also creativity, innovation, problem solving, all of those things as well. So
Yeah, fantastic. Um, you just said something before about I would never say that, I would never do that. And that's one of the things that I've noticed in your writing is that you've got a very clear view of what your boundaries are in the use of AI and change management. So, can you talk us through how you've come to understand those boundaries? And what is it that you would never use AI for in change management? What won't you offload to AI?
yeah, and I think that's super important to not lose the human element. Of course, change brand, practitioners, of course, know that. And so I think that is always at the core for me is, how do I do some tasks with AI better, faster, more efficiently, more effectively, but I'm still the expert here. I know my context. I know my team. I know my organization. I know what this change is actually doing on the ground. And so, how do I partner with AI to help me do some of that faster in a better way, or a more creative, way that can really help me level up my work. And one thing I'll say to that too is being super transparent. I tell people, if you're working with me, there's AI involved. There's somewhere in the process I'm collaborating with AI. And the pieces that even I would say are my boundaries are those really specific human skills that I don't want to lose as a human. All of the learning that I've got in my brain, I don't want to put that all into a GPT and just completely sit back and say, you go and do all those things. And now I'm useless and now I'm out of a job. And so I really use AI very purposefully on how do I get to more of that human connection and interaction. And so whether it's doing tasks faster, editing, reviewing, looking for blind spots. Hey, what is something I'm not considering that I've already done all the thinking, but what am I missing? What perspective am I not thinking about? What are questions that my leader is going to ask that I have not covered in this presentation that I should be aware of, so that I now can sense what is going to be asked before they even ask it. And it really helps me prepare for those conversations, and having those kind of upfront. And even if it's, the pieces that I would say are very human, that collaboration, connecting with my team, one-on-ones, professional development. There are pieces within that I would not offload. But there are pieces that I can get some support in. And so whether it's maybe, having a one-on-one conversation, a coaching conversation with one of my team members, I want to have that human connection, and I want to listen intently to what they're saying. I want to understand what they're thinking, what they're feeling, so that I can react appropriately and help support them. But maybe there are some questions I can have prepared with AI that says, hey, come up with 5 really good questions that could kind of probe this person to get deeper, that I'm not understanding, that I can't make the connection in my brain because there's just so many things happening. How can AI is great at pattern detection. And so if I can see, okay, these things are happening, I don't know how they're connected, but help me. And so AI can help kind of identify, hey, here are 5 great questions to get you to that next level. And so now we can, really be a partner with AI, but I'm still the one having the conversation. I'm still the one understanding what's going on. I am still the one that is, making an impact on this person with a little bit of help with AI on the back end if I can, if that scenario is valid. But there are, distinctly human capabilities that I do not want to offload, that I don't want to lose in my own brain to just say, hey, AI, do this. Now, AI can help, but there are always those critical thinking, problem solving, innovation, one-on-one connections, all of that that are truly human that can maybe use a little bit of AI help on the side, but they should really remain human.
Mm. See, that has me thinking because I'm sure you've seen the fear articles out there about continued use of AI is reducing IQ, it's reducing cognitive ability, we're getting lazier, right? Um,
Mm,
and I don't know how I feel about that because I think I'm okay with a little bit of lazy because my brain is always on. And if that's an
mm,
opportunity to power down, then that's great. But I also see
hmm
what the fear would be. How do you see that AI helps you stay with those strengths? So you're learning your curiosity, your innovation. Is that a personal discipline? Because I know that when I'm working with AI, it can feel really, really addictive. And it can feel
mm,
very, um, I'll just let it do more and more and more because that's easier for me. And
hmm
so I'm kind of, it almost, maybe this is a moral question. I don't know, or an ethical question. But it's an interesting one for me because I can see, yes, to your point, I use AI every day. And I think I'm fairly transparent with it. What I haven't been able to do was that situation you described before. I've actually given it everything that I've ever written. So that's some close to 500,000 words, right? Over 20 years, and tried to have it just replicate me and say what I would say and do what I would do. And it
hmm
doesn't do that very well. Um,
hmm
the memory, the memory capability is not strong enough to synthesize that. Um, so yeah, I'm sorry, Ali, I'm getting off track here, but um, I think for me, it's this question around what is the process for you using it for your strengths and not giving it everything to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yes. And I think there are some scenarios where I've tested it that's I've said, oh, it'd be really great if it could just make this full PowerPoint for me. And then I try to do it and I'm like, this is junk. And I'll
Yeah.
spend, some time going back and prompting it better and being like, nope, not this. Nope, remember I said this. Nope, this. And it's still not nearly as good as I could have just spent 20 minutes to just dive in and do it. So I think there's totally that balance of seeing, okay, it's really good at this. It's not so good at this. I really need to use my human skills. And so I use it quite a bit in kind of my idea generation and my brainstorming. And so I often will have an idea, whether it's, it comes up in conversation, someone mentions something, I read something on LinkedIn, and, I get that kind of curiosity spark. And then I, work with it as really I would a colleague. Now I work from home, and so I've got, a virtual meetings a million times a day, but it acts as that kind of person that I can ask the dumb questions to and that I can kind of go back and forth without bogging down someone else that maybe doesn't care so much about this topic. And so I'm able to kind of go back and forth and say, okay, what about, I'm thinking about this. I don't know how this piece fits in. Help me work it in based on what you know about me, because I similarly have a lot of my writing in there as kind of the knowledge base. And it will, work out pieces and using those human skills where you say, no, that is junk. Don't write about that. Don't include that. No, I want to talk about this. No, I want to work through this. And having that kind of iterative back and forth to really be a collaborator and thought partner, to be able to kind of work through the pieces. And so I have a good relationship with my ChatGPT is my kind of go-to. And I understand what it's very good at, and I can also quickly identify, even if I test out some new scenario or some new product or new idea that I'm working on, I I know what I'm trying to get out of it. I'm not just asking for, hey, solve, world hunger, but help me, work through the
Yeah,
scenario. And I have enough experience and background and knowledge about the topic that I can kind of quickly determine, no, that is junk. No, that is not
yeah,
accurate. That does not make sense. Show me your sources. And sometimes it will say, oh, we made that up. And I say, yeah,
yeah,
don't make up stuff. And so I think knowing, being able to test and experiment with whatever AI you're using or multiple, a lot of times I'll put the same type of prompt into multiple AI tools and see which one it's better at. There are some things that each tool is slightly better at. Um, and where kind of your knowledge and memory is located so it understands your context a little bit better. But being able to, work with it and understand, you know what, it's just faster if I do this myself,
yeah,
which is going to be the case for some things, and it's just not good enough yet. So I think, just really testing and experimenting and being able to see, what works and what doesn't, and where your comfort level is too of, ooh, I'm getting, there'll be some times where I'm like, you know what, I'm being a little, sitting on in the back seat because I'm offloading a little bit too much. Like, let me get back in there and let me,
yeah.
write out my own ideas. Let me do my own, posts, my own whatevers, my own working through it first before I throw it into an AI tool. Sometimes you need it
Yeah.
if you're staring at the blank screen and you say, I just can't even get started. It's good at ideating, but a lot of times it's better if you have something that or the sort of direction or scope or what you're kind of looking at to then have something to react to say, okay, no, I know it's not this. It's something closer to this. Nope, go more in this direction and kind of working with it and iterating.
Awesome. So the latest is, as I'm hearing again at the conferences and the showcasing, is the use of agentic AI. What's your prediction for 2026 in terms of change practitioners' competence with agentic AI?
I'd say across the board, we're still not there yet. It's still, I feel like it's a little bit the new buzzword, the on top of
Yeah,
AI, the new hype. And I haven't seen a ton of great examples when it's done super well. If it's, an agent, a custom GPT, an assistant, a gem, each tool's got their own kind of thing. And it's for, your personal use. It has your context, it has your instructions, it has your idea, and you're just trying to use it, more repetitively that you can work with it and you understand, what the point is. I'd say that's great for, especially for, tasks where it's like, hey, here's my communication agent. This really helps me write my communications. Hey, here's my, ideating on new products agent. Here's my, training plan and, enablement agent. Here's one that helps me with metrics. If we get to a world where some of those things can connect, I think that would be great just for connecting the dots and making sense together. Um,
yeah,
we could get there, but right now it's a little bit more piecemeal, I feel like,
yeah,
to understand and have it be good enough to be fully automated and say just go. I don't think we're there at all yet. You really need that human to do the check, in the same way that you would not just give, some big project to an intern with little instruction and say, go do it, now send it to the CEO without checking. You would want to check along the way, provide feedback, iterate with them, coach them on things. And that's the same with kind of each AI iteration and agent, where you'd have to go back and forth and say, no, remember, these are the instructions. No, remember, we wrote that thing 3 weeks ago. Make sure you're referencing that. Remember this timeline, and
yeah,
kind of go back and forth a little bit.
yeah. Awesome. So, next year, 2026, you're coming to us with one of our webinars. You're bringing the Change Curiosity Lab to us to showcase how you're using AI with agile change practices. As a result of that webinar, what do you hope that the change profession understands differently, um, perhaps by this time next year. So let's forwardcast it. What do you think is going to change for the change profession?
I think I'm hoping that we will start to disarm some of that fear,
Mhm.
that AI is just going to take my job. I'm hoping that by this time next year, we can get to fewer people feeling that way, and more people feeling a bit more empowered to use the tools at their disposal on top of their human superpowers. And it's similar to probably when the Microsoft suite came out, or all of these other online tools, or even your softwares and things. There was that fear, similar to probably
Yeah.
when, you're doing book reports, you had to go to the library and use the card catalog, and then the internet came out, and then Google came out, and then now we're using AI. And so it's just that it's a mindset shift, it's a big behavior change, and it takes time to experiment, and to grow that skill and even just that memory. I always say when I first started, I had to put a physical sticky note in front of my computer, right in front of my face, that said, "Can AI help me do this?" Because I
Yeah.
was such an executor that I had to, totally change the way I was thinking, because I would always just jump in and start doing the thing. And then, my boss would say, "Did you try AI?" And I'd say, "Ah, shoot, forgot to do that." It's that big mindset shift, for you to say, "Wait, I have a partner now. I can have someone help me do this." And so, once that I kind of got into that rhythm, the sticky note came down. Then once agents and assistants started happening, hey, am I repeating the same prompts over and over, the same instructions? Can an assistant help me do that? And that was a new change. And so I think sometimes it takes some of that just physical reminder that says, "Hey, just stop for a second. I know you're super busy. I know you've got back-to-back meetings, but can AI help me do one little piece of this? Can it help me draft that thing? Can it help me edit that thing? Can it help me come up with the outline, send the email, help me make sense and prioritize my calendar?" All of those little things. Can it help me, take better notes and send out the meeting notes after the fact? All of those little pieces are just building that behavior change,
Mm.
step by step. And so I think, having some of that experimentation mindset and being able to work out loud is a great one to do, with your teams, to help build that capability to say, "Okay, I have a partner now that can help me do some of this so that I can now focus on the human work," which is so important in our career.
Okay. So this question's going to be a little bit like a personality quiz. In that, if you could, this will tell us a lot about you, Ali. If you could eliminate one boring task of change management through the use of AI, what would it be?
That could be challenging. For me, it would be kind of the follow-up email. It's just a lot. It's the taking the notes, which I do love to physically take the notes, either writing it down or typing it out. That commits it to my memory. But having the kind of fail safe of being able to transcribe or record and then have the notes, come in automatically. And then again, check them over with a human to say, "Oh, this is incorrect," or "This is right." And then be able to click a button and say, "Now make this, a client approved email summary," so that I can really highlight action items and send this off really quickly. That's one for me that I love to automate. Um, some of them, let's see, I mean, a lot of them, a lot of ideas you could do right now. Come up with questions for my stakeholder, outline this training, come up with, one that I don't like to do actually, coming up with kind of engagement activities within a training, whether it's a poll
Yeah.
question or an activity. I'm leading kind of an Ask Me Anything session at work, and I've been making them themed. So one was Halloween themed, one was Thanksgiving in the US themed, and I had it just come up with kind of really goofy, clearing the table with AI, or pass
Yeah.
the pumpkin microphone, or just like really silly things that is just not my not my go-to. And so that one was a really easy one to say, "Here's what I'm talking about. Here's the actual content I'm trying to talk about. Now add in silly like
Mm.
Thanksgiving themed things or Halloween
Yeah.
themed things. And then it pulls that in really quickly because that is not my strong suit for me personally. But there are a lot of tasks. Honestly, I did an exercise one time to go through typical change activities and AI can really help do a lot of them. There were
Mm.
few that were like no AI at all. And it's, those conversations, it's the having the focus groups, it's connecting with the people. And again,
Yeah.
you can, come up with the questions, but um there were a lot of tasks that it's like, hey, you know what? AI can do a lot of this kind of first lift, at least the first draft of it, or help me, really question, what perspectives am I not looking at or what am I not thinking about? But there is quite a lot that AI can already do with some context about what's going on.
Yeah. I think for me, it's the spreadsheet, the change impact spreadsheet. I'm like, let's
That's
just
another good one. Yep.
knock that on the head. And look, in full transparency, you mentioned before the importance of being transparent about the use of AI. How we've used AI in this podcast is I've fed my ChatGPT instance um, examples of Ali's writings, the brief on what we're doing on the webinar, and said, I want a set of questions that are going to enhance. I then sent that to Ali and said, well, look, here's way too many questions for you, but tell me which ones really resonate with you. Ali has done that, sent it back to me, and then I've mangled pretty much everyone that she said she wanted to hear. So, this is the joy of AI in the human process, human plus AI, right, Ali? Um,
Exactly.
we are coming to a close, and you've been really, really generous, as per usual, with everything that you've shared. Obviously, we want everybody who's attending, who's listening at the moment, to attend the webinar, and I'll put the links in the show notes. But how can the listeners give back to you? What's your ask of the listeners?
Sure. I would just say, you know, for one, be curious. That is always going to kind of come back for me. That's always one of those skills and behaviors that I kept being drawn to is just being curious. Ask the question, what if? How might we? What other things am I not thinking about? How else could we go about this? And especially in the AI world, how do we totally reimagine our role? There are going to be pieces that get offloaded to AI and that AI kind of automates or augments and takes over. So how do we create that future for our profession in the, what it looks like in the future? Maybe we completely, shift things around and we do things in a different way. And so I always see curiosity asking those questions. And of course, AI can help you come up with good questions to really think about and question your own, this is how we've always done it, or that won't work here. Kind of awareness. And so I would just, ask everyone to, add in one curious question at the end of every meeting or within the meeting, and it can start really simply with just one small question. Whether it's a team meeting or a status update or a meeting with a sponsor, if you just ask that one question, hey, what's your thinking behind this decision? Or, hey, how can I, help this scenario even more? How can my team support you better so that this change is less hard for you? Any of those little one questions just kind of, thrown into a conversation can help really drive that psychologically safe environment and one that's more curious that can ask more questions and feel safer to learn and grow together. So that would be kind of my one ask. For me personally, if you would like to, you can find me on LinkedIn. My company, the Change Curiosity Lab, is also on LinkedIn. I post quite frequently there on both accounts. I've got a bunch of, Substack blogs that I post regularly and goes out to my subscribers. Got a website with tons of information. So there's lots of ways to find me, but LinkedIn's probably the easiest one.
Beautiful. Ali, you are the epitome of work out loud, which, is one of our most favorite agile change practices.
Me
So
too.
thank you so much for joining us on a conversation of agile change.
Thank you for having me.